Hello, this is Patrick Riley. I'll be talking about the Battle of Paoli, fought on September 20th, 1777. It was fought after the Battle of Brandywine Creek, which was an American loss. That battle was fought on September 11th, 1777. The British Army was marching towards Philadelphia, and they were blocked by the American forces. The British general, Major General Grey, Earl Grey, was trying to corner Brigadier General Anthony Wayne, and Wayne was familiar with the area. His house wasn't very far away, so he knew where to hide. And he knew all the back roads. But eventually, Grey caught up to Wayne on the night of September 20th, and Grey had developed a plan to not have loaded weapons, and he actually even took the flint out of their guns, and it was supposed to be a bayonet attack at night, and bayonet only and sword. Grey felt that anybody firing their weapon would be lit up at night, and obviously if the British didn't have their guns loaded, they knew exactly where the Americans were. And it was a brilliant plan. It was led by horse troops, dragoons, and mostly infantry. And the infantry was part of the 42nd Highlanders, or the Black Watch, known for their fierce fighting abilities. This is a picture of Brigadier General Wayne on the left and Major General Earl Grey on the right. And you can see in the lower right-hand corner, that's Philadelphia. And the other end of the arrow is Malvern, or actually where the battle took place was not at Paoli, it was at Malvern. But the battle has become known as the Battle of Paoli, or as I mentioned earlier, the Paoli Massacre. About 19 miles northwest of Philadelphia. And that arrow is pointing at Paoli, and that's pointing at the battlefield. And this is the map drawn by the British. It shows the British camp at Tredyffrin. A lot of the villages in the area are Welsh. There's a beautiful little Welsh chapel in Paoli, and so a lot of the names of in the area are Welsh and extremely hard to pronounce. Right there in the right-hand corner in the middle, you can see where the British troops were encamped, and you can see right about just to the left of the circle there are the American troops. They were camped at a pretty good spot in the woods, in cover, and they had a good road at their back. Wayne had positioned them rather well. Wayne had got some notice that they possibly might be attacked that night, and so he had his troops sleep on their arms, and he put out outer vedettes and sentries posted all through the woods around the perimeter, and they did sound the alarm, but the British attacked so quickly that a lot of the troops were just caught unawares. Wayne was heard some shooting, firing, in the distance. They started rousing the troops. By the time they tried to get any semblance of order, the British were right on top of them. This is the British troops in the final order of battle. And just to the left there are the American troops, right here with the blue. And the British swept into the camp, causing disorder. They did take some casualties, but mostly it was a hand-to-hand fight. And the British Highlanders really did some execution. The American forces weren't caught off guard, as many people say. Wayne was prepared for them, but it was a lightning fast attack. And since it was a bayonet attack, a lot of people said that it was, a massacre because of the mutilation of the bodies and such. But it was a military force and a military force. The premise of my paper is that the attack was just a brilliantly executed and planned attack. It was not a massacre by any means. It was just a brilliant attack, and the British, masterfully executed it. The Americans just called it a massacre to use it for propaganda purposes, much like the Boston Massacre. But I think the Boston Massacre is more applicable to the term because there were civilians in the crowd, even though there were armed people as well. So after the attack, there was chaos and disorder, and the Americans fled down this road here about 3.5 miles By the time they got to the White Horse Tavern, which is right here, they were somewhat organized. Wayne got his men in order, and they retreated further to the west. Casualties are about 53 men killed, some men captured, some men missing. The British lost maybe 8 or 9 men. My great uncle was one of the soldiers in the 8th Pennsylvania. He was run through with a sword and taken to a hospital. The British captured that hospital, and he spent the rest of his war days in Halifax, Nova Scotia, in a prisoner of war camp. But he lived to a ripe old age, even though he had been run through with a sword. And this is probably depicting Lieutenant Martin Hunter. You'll see him in the next page. He was running towards the Americans, and one of the American soldiers lifted his gun up to shoot. He put his hand up, and he was shot through the hand. And you'll see him in this next plate. It was a pretty vicious fight in the dark. You know, that wasn't the sort of thing you did back then, and it was very innovative. And Earl Grey was known as No Flint Grey for the rest of his career. And this is a painting of the battle by Xavier Delegata. And people wondered for years why the painting was so accurate for someone who hadn't been at the battle. And then they found out through research that one of the British officers had described to the artist in detail and had him sketch it out first before he painted it. So it's a very detailed drawing. You can see Wayne's guys had built their little wooden huts there up against the tree line. Awesome cover, concealment, but the problem being is that the fires were between them and the British, so they were perfectly silhouetted. And then, as I mentioned earlier, anybody firing a musket was an American, and therefore targets for the British soldiers. So this right here is a depiction of the 16th Light Dragoons, and you can see them swinging their swords down, and the guy right there at the number 1, he's about to kill an American with his sword. Their swords were extra long because they were horsemen's swords, and they were usually kept razor sharp. This is Lieutenant Martin Hunter, the individual we talked about earlier. If you look closely, you can see his right hand. He's bandaging his hand because he has just been shot through the hand. Martin said, "I received a shot in my right hand soon after we entered the camp. I saw the fellow present at me and was running up to him when he fired. He was immediately put to death." And you can see him lying there in the front of him. This is a depiction of Captain Patrick Ferguson's troops. Captain Ferguson's men wore green uniforms, and they were using a pretty innovative weapon at that time, breech-loading muskets. But of course, that night that they didn't have them loaded, but they did carry a 25-inch bayonet, a lethal weapon at close quarters. Number 4 is Captain William Wolfe. You can see him laying there prone. He was killed. He was the commander of the 40th Regiment, Regiment's Light Company. He was an Irishman. He died in the action. Number 5, you can see the Pennsylvania troops there firing at the approaching British soldiers with their fixed bayonets. The fire wasn't very effective. There was very few British casualties. There were a fair amount of British soldiers that were wounded, though. And then you can see right here a British soldier. It looks like he's bayoneting some poor guy inside one of the huts at the far right. But Anthony Wayne, who was the recipient of the attack by General Grey, requested a court-martial. He was acquitted and of any wrongdoing, but the Paoli Massacre was kind of a sticking point in Wayne and Wayne's background. So Wayne came up with a plan when General Washington asked for someone to storm Stony Point. General Wayne said, issue the order, sir. So Wayne attacked Stony Point at night with fixed bayonets, using the exact same tactic that Earl Grey had used. And on July 16, 1779, Wayne captured the garrison at Stony Point, New York. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Johnson had 20 men killed in action, 74 wounded, and Wayne captured 472 troops. Wayne would write to Washington, "The fort and garrison with Colonel Johnston are ours. Our officers and men have behaved like men who were determined to be free." So 1817, the people of Pennsylvania put a monument up at the grave. The 53 soldiers who were killed in the battle were placed in a mass grave. There were some scattered graves, but most of the men, I think they put 53 in this grave. This is a monument that's been there since 1817. So in Pennsylvania folklore, it's the Battle of Paoli is called the Paoli Massacre. It really wasn't any massacre in any sense of the word. It was a brilliant attack, well executed. But the American forces did use it for good propaganda purposes. And as the men ran up the hill to attack Stony Point, they were screaming, "Remember Paoli." Just like later they'd be saying, "Remember the Alamo," and even more recently, "Remember Pearl Harbor." So the conclusion that I came to is that the battle was not a massacre. General Wayne was not totally surprised. It was just the British soldiers attacked so quickly and so effectively that they just basically ran right through the camp and caused disorder. And Wayne's guys had to retreat, but the casualty numbers were pretty low. But it has been remembered to this day, and you can look, anywhere, just Google Paoli Massacre, and you'll see that the people of Pennsylvania and the Americans got their mileage out of that one. Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.